I didn't think I would be making another video on the coronavirus so quickly, but so much has happened in such a short time, I felt I had to. The rates for infection have spread exponentially, and the rates for death have as well. Or have they? Science depends on proper data in order to make new discoveries or find cures. Unfortunately, we don't seem interested in proper data right now and only want to push a narrative that people are dying nonstop from this disease. Of course, there really is only one reason to push that narrative, and that is to destroy the economy with hopes of replacing Trump in November. I touched further on that in my previous video. I'll include the link in the description. But if you look at the data, you'll find even though deaths from coronavirus are skyrocketing, suddenly deaths from anything else seem to be dropping off. Is that a coincidence? Of course not. What's happening is that if a person happens to have coronavirus but then dies of a heart attack, they still are calling it a COVID-19 death. This kind of thing will never give us proper data to fight this thing. And before anyone thinks this is a conspiracy theory, Dr. Birx herself stated that as a matter of fact.
So I think in this country, we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality. There are other countries that if you had a pre-existing condition, and let's say the virus caused you to go to the ICU and then have a heart or kidney problem, some countries are recording that as a heart issue or a kidney issue and not a COVID-19 death. If someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death.
Memes are floating around making a joke of the situation, but it's actually sad because the real numbers are being skewed by this. Don't mistake this as me saying deaths from coronavirus are not on the rise, but the numbers they are reporting simply are not true. The media. Like every scenario, the media are spinning facts to push their agenda. It still baffles my mind how some people trust these news outlets. Someone somewhere owns the news outlets. That someone has their own political views, and they actually use their media properties to push those views. CNN and Fox pull the same thing, but push opposing agendas. It's not a new thing either. In the 1800s, Mark Twain said this, quote, "If you don't read a newspaper, you are uninformed. If you do read the newspaper, you are misinformed." End quote. If you want the truth, then watch one news segment on the left and then one on the right reporting the same story, and chances are you're going to see different angles, but the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, hence the name of my channel. But if you want to live a happy life, just avoid the news altogether and observe what happens in your surroundings. But the media are having a field day, making people live in fear. They recently reported on a viral video of a nurse saying they had a mask shortage. But that video ended up being a complete lie, but they ran with it anyway. Then they used negative spin headlines such as this, quote, "Confirmed US COVID-19 death toll reaches 20,000, highest in the world," end quote. This is called spin. Yes, it's technically true, but why would you word it in such a negative way? The answer is simple. It is meant to look and sound negative for a reason. It is meant to instill fear and make people doubt that Trump is handling the situation well. But the truth is, the US has populations greater than all of the European countries. The US has 6 times the population of Italy. Spain, Italy, France, Germany, and the UK combined roughly make up the same population as the US. And when you add up theirs, they are roughly more than 91,000 more than the US in infections. So the truth is that the US is actually doing far better than any country when you look at population versus death toll. It could be argued that China does in fact have more people, so why are their numbers lower? But let's be honest, nothing coming out of China can be trusted. Either they did all this on purpose to hit us for the trade deal, or they covered up an accident at their lab. The truth is, we don't know their real infection or death toll numbers. I'll get more into them later. So that leaves India. There are 1.35 billion people in India. So why are their number of infections so low? As of this video, India is ranked 22nd in new cases. That's pretty impressive considering their congestion. But is that really a surprise? For a while now, Trump has been touting the use of hydroxychloroquine as a promising treatment for COVID-19. Of course, the media blasts him for it, saying his support of that drug is laughable and dangerous. But there is data to support Trump's claims, and that drug has been in use for decades as a malaria treatment. The supposed complaints about the drug being used for COVID-19 are the side effects, but I would think that the potential side effects are better than death to the coronavirus. But in 2016, over half of India's population, which 698 million, was at risk of contracting malaria according to the World Malaria Report. which also reported India accounting for 6% of the entire world's malaria cases, 6% of deaths caused by the disease, and 51% of the global Plasmodium vivax malaria cases. Because of that, anti-malaria drugs were already being used in high volumes in India. This could easily account for their lower numbers of COVID-19 cases, because they were already taking preventative care without even realizing it. This actually supports Trump's claim about the drugs. But what is the media doing about all that? They are reporting misleading headlines saying that Trump owns a stake in hydroxychloroquine. Instead of being hopeful about a drug that potentially works, they decided to downplay the results of the drug and attack Trump because he owns shares of Sanofi, a company that produces the drug. But if you look at what he owns it through mutual funds. That isn't suspect at all. What big investor does not invest in pharmaceuticals on some level? If Trump owned thousands of Sanofi shares outright that he bought exclusively, then yeah, I'll be honest, it would be very suspicious. But owning what looks to be valued somewhere between as low as $99 to $15,000 worth in mutual funds is not an indication of wrongdoing whatsoever. The headlines are just once again spinning facts to push their narrative that Trump is greedy or somehow caused all of this for his own gain. The media should be held accountable for their lies because it is causing some people to ignore the potential value of hydroxychloroquine, and it is actually costing human lives. Let's not forget the nonsense that Trump didn't respond fast enough. I went through some of that in the previous video as well, but let's look at some of the comments and dates from the CDC here, and let's also see what the Democrats and the left media were saying at the time.
True, good point. And Sanjay, you were telling us the last hour that there's an important context we need to keep this in, and that is that the flu is more deadly.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the ironies, I think, that always comes up with this. Take a look at the numbers. I mean, this is the U.S. flu season, this season alone.
Let's take a moment for some important context here. One person has died from the coronavirus in the U.S. By comparison, in the average year, between 12 and 60,000 Americans die from the regular flu.
How concerned should ordinary Americans be about this?
A lot of people are concerned about the coronavirus because they're hearing a lot of news about it right now. But the reality is, comparing it to the flu, for example, it's not even close to being at that stage.
But there's still...
And while we're still learning about the coronavirus, I want to give you some important context. So far, we know of fewer than 24 deaths from coronavirus in the U.S. By comparison, between 12 and 60,000 Americans die of the flu in an average year.
And while there's a lot of fear over this coronavirus, the flu is already widespread in the U.S. and it really is much more deadly, is it not? I mean, the CDC is estimating that so far this season there have been at least 19 million cases of the flu in the U.S., 180,000 hospitalizations, and 10,000 deaths.
Stake and international scale. But for Americans, we are more, prone to obviously getting seasonal flu than novel coronavirus. So certainly do get your flu shot. And take this.
We don't need to be overly concerned yet in the United States about the novel coronavirus. Right. We do need to keep our eyes open for the seasonal flu. We're right in the middle of the flu season still.
So the CDC now has estimated that there have been 12,000 deaths from the flu, just the flu. How worried should Americans be about coronavirus?
Coronavirus is not going to cause a major issue in the United States. If we have it here, we have healthcare institutions that can cordon people off. We can take care of them.
Politics. Of course, both sides, Republican and Democrat alike, are doing their best to take advantage of this crisis. The stimulus package gives a lot of money to a lot of pointless entities that have nothing to do with the coronavirus or boosting our economy back to where it was. But politicians never let a good crisis go. Kennedy Center, PBS, they're getting millions of dollars. And of course, they just happen to be big donors to the Democrat Party. Weird. But politically, Democrats also went on the offensive. When New York was hit hard by COVID-19, they claimed Trump was withholding the requested number of ventilators in an extortion-type fashion. when in reality, Trump's administration looked at the numbers and said they don't need that many because New York already had stockpiles of ventilators. Cuomo claimed that, yeah, they have those stockpiles, but they were holding them until the apex and that they would still need more. Yes, you heard that right. Cuomo actually said he was withholding them until an emergency. I thought this wasn't an emergency. Cuomo's lie was meant to create the image that Trump demanded loyalty or New York would suffer for it. It has since been proven untrue, and as soon as Trump called him out, then suddenly Cuomo changed his tune and praised Trump's efforts for answering every need they had. In fact, he isn't the only Democrat to praise Trump this week. California Governor Gavin Newsom had nothing but praise for how Trump is handling the situation, and Michigan Democrat lawmaker State Rep Karen Whitsett of Detroit praises Trump for bringing hydroxychloroquine to the forefront because she does believe it saved her life. Then there are some people saying Trump wants the post office to go bankrupt to avoid mail-in ballots, and in the event people cannot vote in person come November, which of course the puppet masters of this whole thing will ensure a second or third outbreak wave will occur around November for that very reason. First of all, if there was no such thing as cheating, then why would Trump be scared of a mail-in system? He is set to win by a landslide, that it's irrefutable. He has proven he can take this country's economy to new heights. If anyone can get us back on track after this mess, it's definitely him. It's not Biden. So why would Trump be reluctant about the mail-in ballot system? Maybe because it's owned and created by George Soros-owned companies. Soros has made it crystal clear he will do anything to make sure Trump does not see a second term, and even said he will make sure Trump doesn't serve his entire first term. I don't know about you, but when someone that is known for destabilizing entire countries for his own personal gain makes comments like that, I would have a hard time trusting his ballot system as well. The irony of the response versus accusations of Trump being fascist. After 3 years of hearing from the left that Trump is a fascist, without any evidence, mind you, to support that claim, it is very interesting and predictable to see that the governors or mayors of primarily blue states and blue cities have been enacting some of the most fascist systems since Nazi Germany. Curfew, checkpoints, limits as to where you can go or how many people can assemble, and even what goods can be sold in a store are popping up. Implementing a curfew is baffling to me. The idea of social distancing is to keep people apart as much as possible. But a curfew guarantees the masses will all be operating at the same time of day together. And it's not like the virus is somehow nocturnal, so it's just ridiculous. A curfew does not make sense in this instance. In Michigan, they have started a petition to recall Governor Whitmer for her actions of closing and banning various non-essential businesses and activities while leaving others open. Worse than that, buying anything she considers non-essential, such as children's car seats and seeds to grow food, or motorboating and entering any residence that one doesn't own, is banned. For those that live in Michigan, I'll include the petition link in the description. In Maui, Hawaii, they have checkpoints which actually put people's lives in danger by eliminating the social distancing, and has the Army National Guard directly handling identification with the same gloves as used from the previous vehicle stop. What easier way to spread the virus than that? In fact, an online petition is also available there to remove Mayor Victorino. I'll include the link in the description for that as well, for those that live in Maui. Even worse to think about is this. If the Democrats are exploiting the situation, then they will push for a longer shutdown and stricter rules to make people's lives miserable, so people will blame Trump and vote him out in November. But remember, each state is making their own guidelines to meet the federally declared national emergency. China lies. I mentioned the different possible angles of China in my last video, saying that if it was a planned attack due to the new trade deal, then that would explain why their numbers were so low. They would have prepared to contain it before releasing it, then let it cause just enough casualties to look legitimate, but have it contained and controlled afterwards. But I also said maybe they are not giving true numbers because COVID-19 could be worse than reports are letting on, and if it was an accidental leak from their virology lab, then they would be held accountable for it, and they're trying to avoid that. Unfortunately, it is now being reported that my previous comments also might be true. It seems China may have been taking older victims that weren't doing well and burning them alive to make room for younger victims. But now there are some people believe new evidence has surfaced indicating that the numbers are much, much worse than reported and that China didn't contain anything. Now I want to stress again, this part is not proven. This is all just another theory. But 21 million cell phone accounts and 840,000 landlines were recently closed between December 2019 and March 2020 2020 in China. Now that might not seem like evidence in the US, but in China it is mandatory to have your cell phone to generate health codes, and the only reason to cancel a cell phone number is that the user has passed away. So if this ends up being true, then this is actually a game changer. We could be looking at something much, much worse than ever predicted. And the fact that China just implemented their second lockdown, it doesn't look good, but only time will tell us in the end. But I don't want to just freak people out, so you need to think about this. December also saw China launch their mandatory facial scan program for all mobile phone users. Perhaps this has something to do with those numbers. I'm actually just guessing here, but maybe those older phones had to be transitioned to newer ones, and maybe they had to get newer numbers for some reason. Who knows? Or maybe many of those phone numbers were linked to protesters in Hong Kong that are quietly being silenced. Who knows? But when I find out more, I'll share it. But new evidence does support that China's death toll is closer to 40,000, and that sounds like a much more reasonable number than 21 million. I mean, 21 million would almost be impossible to hide from satellite imagery for all the graves or cremations. Regardless of how the virus spread, the entire coronavirus debacle leads to accountability. When the dust settles on all this, and if we find that this was in fact an intentional attack, then that is actually an act of war. If it ends up being an accidental leak at a lab, then the world may still hold China accountable. Japan is pulling their companies out of China, and it looks like the US will as well. Then if each country wants China to be held accountable, they could make economic demands and sanctions that could crush China economically. But that too can lead to war. After World War I, the world rightfully held Germany accountable for the war. This caused Germany's economy to plummet. That economy eventually led to the rise of Hitler, and eventually what the Germans felt was a necessary action to get back on their feet, a second world war. The world holds China accountable like they should. It could unfortunately cripple them so badly that it forces them to start a war. So let's all hope we get answers soon, and let's hope those answers don't lead to war. The numbers. When all this began, I predicted total deaths would be about 60,000. That's a common number for the flu, so I figured it was somewhat similar. Then I heard outrageous estimates from Dr. Fauci and others like 2.2 million. I thought, oh my God, I must be wrong about all this. But then they cut that number to 100,000, and then they just recently cut it to my initial number around 60,000. It's weird how when you point out facts and claims that this number is a decent number, you get wackos making stupid comments like, try telling that to the families that lost someone, like this idiot here, when I show them that the US is doing better than almost any country. I get that any death is unfortunate. I get it. And I feel for those that lost anybody. I have family members in the medical field fighting this across the country, and that includes in New York. So I understand what is happening, but people don't seem to realize death happens every day in large numbers that we barely ever see or recognize because the population is so high. 2,160 people die each year from weird things like constipation. Agricultural machinery claims 4,000 lives every year, but we don't shut them down because we need them. Car accidents kill 38,000 people a year, but do you see us banning cars or shutting the world down? No. Smoking kills 480,000 people a year, and 41,000 of those are from secondhand smoke. Complete innocent bystanders, 41,000. So why isn't smoking illegal? Real numbers do not lie. The numbers of what's going on do not justify the worldwide shutdown. In fact, many hospitals are now starting to lay off employees because the hospitals are so empty, like the Mayo Clinic. And even the portable army hospitals set up in Washington have been taken down because they never even saw a single patient. These numbers are so low worldwide that if they never once mentioned it in the news, I'm starting to wonder if the world would have ever even noticed at all, or would they have just assumed that the flu was really bad this year and that's it. It's a good thing the numbers aren't what they projected. Believe me, I'm thankful for that. But again, that leads us back to my first video. What powers are at work here that could cause such a shutdown, and why? Is this just a battle of the billionaire globalists again? Or is it an attack from a patient communist leader? Or even worse, is it a combination of both? If you like this video, go ahead and click the thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to be updated with new content.